silver is probably the most asymmetric setup of anything, to include all of the other commodities. It's the only commodity on the planet that I know of that's trading below where it was in 1980, and not just a little bit below, but it's half. It's less than half of where it was 40 years ago. So that alone right there just shows you how undervalued it is. And it's a monetary metal. And I think, as most of your listeners, I'm sure would agree, we're headed into a currency crisis. The national debt and the situation we're in is mathematically impossible to repay. And governments always choose 100% of the time to debase the currency in such situations. And we have historical precedent going back millennia. And silver and gold tend to be the prime beneficiaries in this exact environment that we're in now. So, it's a volatile ride. Silver is very volatile, but a lot of people, I think, conflate volatility with risk. And if you're willing to ride through that volatility and you have a multi-year time horizon, I can't think of a more asymmetric setup than silver. Well, I've kind of had an out of consensus view from the beginning when they started talking about taper that I thought they would actually do it, and they are. And I do think that they'll actually raise rates. And I think, it remains to be seen how many they'll get in, but I do think they'll get a few in. But contrary to common belief is that that's not necessarily bearish for the metals. Because the metals markets, especially gold, are very forward looking. So I think they're pricing in these rate hikes now, which is why we've seen the weakness that we have in the last few months. If you go back to December of 2015, that was the first time the Fed had raised rates in many years. Well, within a few days, that marked the low for the metals. $1,045 in gold was December something of 2015, right after the first rate hike. I don't view that as bearish at all if they do raise rates. What does matter is real interest rates. And if they were to get really aggressive and get ahead of the curve like Paul Volcker did in the 80s, yeah, that would be problematic, but there's no way they can do that. So I think inflation is going to continue to be higher than any nominal interest rate. Yeah, I think the mindset when you own physical metal should be preservation of purchasing power or preservation of capital. However, I do think that silver is going to increase your purchasing power in the coming years. When I buy physical gold, all I'm doing is I just want to preserve that purchasing power. But when I buy silver, I do have some expectation, or a high level of expectation, that my purchasing power is going to increase. But really, when I want to speculate for capital appreciation, that's where I go to the mining stocks. The big question I think a lot of investors are asking themselves, I've thought about this myself, is we're finally seeing public acknowledgement of inflation. It's being reflected in the CPI, yet inflation hedges such as gold and silver perform so poorly. And people say, what's going on? Well, I think right now there's still a belief that the Fed can fight it. So you would get, we recently in the last few months, you'd see a high inflation number come out and then gold gets hit. Well, I think because people say, oh, well, now the Fed's going to fight it aggressively. So the big inflection point is going to be when people realize they're not going to fight it. They're going to stay behind the curve. They may throw a couple of nominal rate hikes in there, but they're going to be behind the curve. And when the general market participants realize that's when we see the next big upleg in the metals, how I see it. The whole system is reliant on credit and debt, and an ever increasing debt. Not only if credit stops expanding, everything kind of implodes. We saw a little bit of credit contraction in 2008, and look what happened. I mean, if you look at a long-term chart of credit growth, and it's just this little blip, and everything almost imploded. And here's something for people to think about too, with the raising interest rates. The national debt is rapidly approaching $30 trillion. Let's just call it 30 trillion for easy math. Every 1% rise in interest rates equals $300 billion of interest payments on that national debt. So it's mathematically impossible for the government to remain solvent if rates rose to say 5%. 5% of 30 trillion would be $1.5 trillion in interest payments. And they take in, I don't know exactly, but I think it's around $3.5 or $4 trillion in federal tax receipts. So that would be a huge portion of federal tax receipts going just to pay the interest on the debt. Forget about the military and pensions and Social Security and all these other things. So someone once asked me, what's a 4-letter word for why silver and gold are likely to, go up? And I said, what? And they said math. So it's just a big math problem with no good solution. I plan to hold some physical metal for the long term, just as an insurance policy. I want to give it to my children, and hopefully they give it to their children's children, and so on. But for the portion of my precious metals portfolio that I'm looking to, gain purchasing power with, you have to keep in mind these are very cyclical investments, and you have to have an exit strategy, because oftentimes in these bull markets they come down just as fast as they rose. So whenever I talk about platinum, I like to give the make the statement ahead of time that I'm not saying platinum is going to do better than silver, because on a risk adjusted return, we're headed into a currency crisis, and silver is my preferred way to invest in this environment. The previous times when we've had these major stock market sell-offs, like 2008, 2020, the metals and general equities had been rising together, so they fell together. It's kind of the opposite this time, where the metals have trended lower for the last 12 plus months, where equities have just gone like this. So I'm sure the equities, the precious metal sector, and our mining stocks will get hit. Yeah, I was saying, I like to say fundamentals tell me what to buy, the technicals tell me when to buy or when to sell. And we use technical analysis to identify low risk entry points and times to take some off the table.
Before we continue, help us clicking that YouTube like button and subscribe now to our channel. This shows the algorithm that you valued this information, and it helps us spread that message. Sharing is caring. And now, let's continue.
I have bad news for you. If you're not rich by now, you're screwed. And if you're in debt, you're even double screwed. How so, you might wonder? Well, the sad truth is that you're working your whole life to make someone else rich. The mega corporations, the banks, the politicians, everyone is getting richer. They get your money. And what is even worse, they get your time, they get your life. You are not even in a rat race, you're in a financial prison. But what could a solution for you look like? Honestly, I don't know, but I know what a solution for me would look like. It's very simple. I use whatever money I have and I multiply it with 1,000. This could make my life much easier and probably yours as well. If you have $1,000 available and multiply this with 1,000, I believe that this could solve some financial issue for the one or the other. Of course, if you're ugly, you would have to multiply it with much more than 1,000. My name is Marco Stan, and this is what I decided to do. I decided to 1000x my money. This is not a joke. I know what you may be thinking. What is this guy talking about? How should this work? This is not possible. Well, I made a detailed video where I laid out my plan. And some clever folks might even want to look at this plan and copy it and do exactly what I do. This is just a little hint on the side. You have two options. You leave, you forget what you have seen. You do whatever you're doing and you hope that somehow you get some other results. Good luck with that. Or you click the link below the video. You enter your email address, because I'm not showing this to everybody. You at least watch my video on how I plan to 1000x my money. The choice is yours. Make the right choice. Join me. See what a different future you could have. See at least how I intend, how I plan to do the 1000x. So click on the link below, enter your email address, and I see you on the other side. Your Marco Stan.